I ran the retirement math on a $65,000 salary, saving exactly 20% every year for 30 years. The number I got back was not a retirement. It was a deadline. 20%. The rule every financial advisor, every budgeting app, every personal finance book pushes as the gold standard. Save 20% and you will be fine. Save 20% and the future takes care of itself. I saved it. I tracked every dollar. I ran the projections using current Social Security data, current inflation rates, and current healthcare cost estimates for retirees in the United States. And I found something that nobody running the standard financial calculator wants to show you. Saving 20% of a $65,000 salary today will leave you with roughly $27,678 per year in retirement income, measured in today's purchasing power. Before healthcare. Before the Social Security Trust Fund runs its projected reduction in 2033. My name is Victor, and on this channel we run real financial experiments so you do not have to. Here is what the math actually shows and what you need to do about it. The 20% rule is not just slightly off. It is built on assumptions that stopped being true somewhere between 2008 and now, and nobody updated the formula. Here is what is at stake if you are following it. The median American worker earns $65,000 a year. If you are saving 20%, you are putting away $13,000 annually. That feels responsible. That feels like discipline. And by the old standard it is. But the old standard was designed in a different economy. Since 2020, housing costs in major U.S. metros increased 47% on average. According to the National Association of Realtors 2024 report, healthcare premiums for individuals rose 24% over the same period per the Kaiser Family Foundation. Grocery inflation hit a 40-year peak in 2022 and has not fully reversed. Childcare costs have outpaced wage growth every year since 2015, according to the Center for American Progress. None of that has been absorbed into the 20% rule. The rule assumes a stable cost structure that no longer exists. It assumes Social Security will pay its full promised benefit, which the Social Security Administration's own 2024 Trustees Report says it will not, at least not after 2033, when the trust fund is projected to deliver only 79 cents on the dollar. And it almost completely ignores what healthcare costs in retirement actually look like, which in 2024, Fidelity estimated at $165,000 for a single retiree and $315,000 for a couple. That is the gap between what you think you are building and what you are actually building. The 20% savings rule traces back to Elizabeth Warren's 2005 book, All Your Worth, which popularized the 50-30-20 framework. 50% for needs, 30% for wants, 20% for savings. It was designed as a floor, not a ceiling. Warren herself framed it as the minimum threshold for building financial security, not the number that guarantees a comfortable retirement. That distinction got lost somewhere in the translation from academic personal finance writing to every app, spreadsheet, and budgeting guide that now treats the rule as a finished answer. Here is what the rule assumed when it was built. It assumed inflation would average 2.5 to 3% annually, consistent with Federal Reserve targets. It assumed Social Security would remain fully funded through the careers of today's working population. It assumed healthcare costs in retirement would remain manageable as a percentage of income. And it assumed housing costs as a share of earnings would hold roughly constant. Not one of those assumptions held through the 2020s. The Federal Reserve's own data shows the real purchasing power of the dollar fell more than 17% between January 2020 and December 2023. That is the fastest erosion since the 1980s. The Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers hit 9.1% year-over-year in June 2022, the highest reading in 41 years. Social Security's 2024 Trustees Report projects the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund will be depleted by 2033. After that point, incoming payroll taxes would cover only about 79% of scheduled benefits. That is not speculation. That is the government's own projection in its own annual report. And healthcare. The average annual cost for a 65-year-old retiree in the United States was $7,030 in 2023, according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, and it roughly doubles by age 85 due to increased utilization. Over a 20-year retirement, the out-of-pocket exposure for a single person approaches $150,000 to $200,000 in today's dollars, assuming no major illness. When Marcus pushed back and said that people have been retiring on this rule for decades, I understood the argument. And he is right. For people who started saving in 1990, they are retiring now into a market that rewarded them with Social Security intact, with lower healthcare exposure. You are not them. You are starting now in a different economy with different math. I ran the numbers across 3 salary scenarios because the 20% rule hits people differently depending on what they earn. I used a $50,000 salary, a $65,000 salary, and an $85,000 salary. All 3 fall within range of median full-time U.S. worker earnings, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2024 Occupational Employment and Wage Statistics Report. Here is the math. Scenario 1. Salary of $50,000 a year. You save 20%, which is $10,000 annually. You invest that in a diversified index fund portfolio averaging a 7% annual return, which is the long-term historical average for the S&P 500 adjusted for fees and dividends. You do this for 30 years. At the end of 30 years, you have approximately $944,000. Now apply real purchasing power. Over 30 years at a 3% average inflation rate, $1 today is worth about 41 cents. That $944,000 is worth approximately $389,000 in today's purchasing power. At a 4% safe withdrawal rate, that produces $15,560 a year in today's dollars. Add Social Security at the 79% projected payout. The average Social Security benefit in 2024 is $1,907 a month. At the reduced rate, that is $1,507 a month, or $18,084 a year. Adjusted back to today's purchasing power over 30 years, that is approximately $7,446 annually. Total retirement income in today's dollars, $23,006 a year. You were earning $50,000. You are now living on $23,006. Scenario 2. Salary of $65,000 a year. You save $13,000 annually. Same return assumptions, same time frame. You accumulate approximately $1,228,000. In today's purchasing power, $505,800. At 4% withdrawal, $20,232 a year. Add Social Security in today's dollars, $7,446. Total $27,678 a year. You were earning $65,000. You are now living on $27,678. Scenario 3. Salary of $85,000 a year. You save $17,000 annually. You accumulate approximately $1,606,000. In today's purchasing power, $661,400. At 4%, $26,456 a year. Social Security at this earnings level is slightly higher. Call it $9,000 in today's dollars. Total $35,456 a year. You were earning $85,000. You are now living on $35,456. Alex walked me through her actual budget when I showed her these numbers. She is 32, earns $68,000, has been saving exactly 20% for 4 years, and felt genuinely secure about it. When she saw her scenario, she went quiet. Not dramatic, just the kind of quiet that happens when something you believed stops adding up. Has that number ever landed on you like that? Drop it in the comments. I want to know at what point the math shifted for you. Here is the detail that makes all 3 scenarios worse. None of those numbers include healthcare. Fidelity's 2024 retiree healthcare cost estimate puts lifetime out-of-pocket costs at $165,000 for a single 65-year-old retiree. That assumes Medicare coverage and no long-term care. Genworth's 2024 Cost of Care Survey puts assisted living at an average of $5,511 a month. Take $165,000 off each scenario's real purchasing power nest egg. Scenario 1. $389,000 minus $165,000 leaves $224,000. That generates $8,960 a year plus $7,446 in Social Security. Total, $16,406. Scenario 2, $505,800 minus $165,000 leaves $340,800. That generates $13,632 a year plus $7,446. Total $29,078. Scenario 3. $661,400 minus $165,000 leaves $496,400. That generates $19,856 a year plus $9,000. Total $28,856. That is what the 20% rule actually produces. Not the version in the brochure. The actual version, with actual inflation, actual Social Security projections, and actual health care costs. The question Marcus kept pressing was the right one. Okay, so the math is bad? What is the number that actually works? I cross-referenced 3 sources: the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College, the Employee Benefit Research Institute, and Vanguard's 2024 How America Saves report. Here is what the research shows consistently. For workers earning between $50,000 and $60,000, the savings rate required to retire at 65 with 70% income replacement is between 28% and 33%, assuming a 30-year working career and average market returns. That finding comes from the Center for Retirement Research's 2023 National Retirement Risk Index, which tracks whether American households are saving enough to maintain their standard of living. For workers earning between $65,000 and $85,000, the required rate drops slightly to 24% to 29% because Social Security replaces a somewhat higher percentage of income at that earnings level. Still not 20%. Vanguard's 2024 report found the median 401k contribution rate among their 5 million account holders was 7.4%. The average, pulled up by high earners, was 11.7%. The gap between what people are saving and what they actually need is not a small error. It is a structural problem that has been building quietly for 20 years. Now here is the part that surprised me most, and I think it will surprise you too. There is a behavioral finance mechanism that makes this gap worse, not because people stop saving, but because hitting the target stops them from questioning it. Psychologists call it the savings adequacy illusion. Once people reach a round number savings rate, a specific percentage, a specific monthly amount, they experience what researchers call completion bias. The goal registers as met. The anxiety goes down. The monitoring stops. This was documented in a 2019 study in the Journal of Marketing Research by Shlomo Benartzi and colleagues at UCLA Anderson School of Management. 20% does not just leave you short financially. It leaves you feeling satisfied in a way that actively prevents you from discovering the real number. That is the part nobody tells you. When did you last run a full retirement projection? Not just check your contribution percentage, but run the actual math with real inflation and real healthcare costs as separate line items. If the answer is never, you are not alone. But that is the exact gap this experiment was designed to close. Here is the corrected framework I built after running this experiment. Step 1. Run your actual retirement projection, not the default one in your 401k app, which displays nominal dollars and hides inflation. Use a calculator that lets you input a real inflation rate, a reduced Social Security benefit, and a separate healthcare cost line. New Retirement and Projection Lab both allow this level of detail. Run the numbers using 3% inflation, 79% Social Security, and $165,000 in lifetime healthcare costs. See what your actual number looks like. Step 2. Set a savings target based on your age and your actual projection result, not a generic rule. If you are under 35 and your projection shows a gap, the correction is manageable now. Moving from 20% to 25% or 28% at this stage has a compounding effect that changes the outcome dramatically over 30 years. If you are between 35 and 45, the window is tighter but not closed. Closing a $200,000 retirement gap at age 40 requires approximately $550 more a month invested at 7% for 25 years. That is a real adjustment, but it is achievable. If you are over 45 and behind, the most powerful lever is not savings rate alone. It is extending your working years. Each additional year of work adds income, delays withdrawals, and lets the balance compound. Retiring at 67 instead of 65 increases your Social Security benefit by 16% and adds 2 full years of compounding to your portfolio. Step 3. Review the math every January. Not when the market drops. Not when you panic. On a schedule, before the year gets busy. The 20% rule was never meant to be permanent. It was always a floor. Start treating it like one. Next week I am testing the retirement math that 62% of Americans have never seen, specifically the numbers most retirement calculators are hiding from you by design. If what you saw today surprised you, next week will change your entire framework. Subscribe to Victor Wealth Experiment so you do not miss the results. This is Victor Wealth Experiment. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next experiment.